Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Mind-Boggling Concepts on the Torah. As per usual, please put down any sharp objects and don't get too close to the microphone. We don't want to spread any of those diseases. So this week's Parsha is Pekudei, and we have a guest appearance from Zita who wants to tell us something. Go ahead, Zita.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on what we said last week about how Hashem taught Moshe to turn the bitter into the sweet. And I realized, because it's something that Hashem put in my head, I realized that we missed a part of this whole story, which was Miriam. What does her name mean?
Right.
Bitterness, right? And then there's this bitter decree to throw all the newborn boys into the river, and the men decide, as her father's the leader, and the men decide not to have any more children. And so, there is already a bitter decree, but now they add a self-imposed bitterness, and she's the one that confronts it and says, we don't need this additional bitterness. Right. And the moment she does that, she begins the process of the bitter decree slowly turning into the Redeemer, right? Into sweet. So then her parents get married, Moshe is born, and thus begins the process of redemption.
Very good. Psst.
And then also, in whose merit do we have the water from the rock?
In whose, right, Miriam, that's right.
Miriam, because she's the one that was involved in turning bitterness into sweetness. You can tell that from her name. It's so fascinating to me.
Very good. Well, that ties beautifully in something I wasn't going to talk about, but let's
digress further.
I think everybody's caught the disease. The aggression is catching, right? Because Pesach is coming up, and it's something Rabbi Lopiansky points out. The beginning of the freedom of the Jewish people was marked by what?
Wait, the beginning of the Jews' freedom was marked by what? You mean like matzah and etc.?
Yes, right. What was it marked by?
Well, first it was the blood on the lentils and the matzah, and the sheep, blood, matzah.
Right, that's true, right? But the way the Jewish people expressed their newfound freedom was in the form of a complaint. Now, Rabbi Lopiansky points out that the Haggadah starts in the same way.
Halach ma'anya?
The 4 questions. The Haggadah really starts with the 4 questions.
Okay.
Right? Which are essentially complaints. What we would call complaints.
Really? I mean, I thought they were just questions.
Yeah, right. Well, what's the difference in a question and a complaint? Right? Why are we
doing this? I'm annoyed.
Right.
The question is, why are we doing things? This is so interesting, so curious.
Right. It's the same language.
Okay.
It can also be a complaint. It can also be a question.
Okay.
I had more than one student who was born a Christian thrown out of Sunday school because they asked questions.
Yes. Those pesky children asking good questions. We can't have them here.
Right. So,
we don't know how to answer them. So
it reminds me, exactly. It reminds me of an old joke about the first refusenik that leaves the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And he comes to America and they ask him, what was it like living under Soviet authoritarian rulership where, you couldn't decide what you're going to read? He says, tell you the truth, I couldn't complain. He says, really? He said, what was it like having food shortages and everything? He says, be honest with you, I couldn't complain. And what about the army ran everything and you couldn't decide where to live and all these things. I couldn't complain. He says, well, why'd you come to America then? Because here I can complain. Right? The mark of a free person is the ability to complain.
My children are free, man.
It's true. That's a very good sign. If you create, which now ties into beautifully the Parsha, because the Parsha begins and ends on the same thing. Now, we also have to note there's a common, as a consistent theme that we've been struggling with throughout these weeks. Is that the book Shmos, the Exodus, this is the last Parsha in the whole book. So that each book also begins and ends on the same theme. Now, some are more challenging than others, and this one's not a piece of cake, and I'm not sure if I've got it correctly.
Pakadati, what's the challenge here?
Yeah, what's the challenge? Go ahead. How do you? Are you joking?
So at the end of Bereshis, Yosef says Pakadati, and look at this at the end of Shemos, Elet Pekudei. It's the same shoresh.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Well, it doesn't explain the beginning, does it, of Shemos?
Yeah. But it's nice. It's a very good point, by the way, that you're making. I really like that.
It didn't come from me.
The end of Bereshis is the beginning, is the end of Shmos. That's an interesting thing. I wonder if that carries through in the next three books. You have to keep that in mind.
Oh, Rabbi, now that we went down this path, the beginning of Shemos, it talks about a new king that rises over Egypt who did not know Yosef. And Yosef is the one that said, Pakadati, because he knew that it would come a time where they wouldn't recognize and appreciate and be grateful to him and his people for saving Egypt. Wow, Hashem is descending them, aren't they?
This is very good. Yeah, it's something you guys are smoking in New Jersey. It's really
it's Hashem. Hashem is sending stuff down because I have no brains otherwise.
Oh, it's also this week's Parsha. It's also because they come to Moshe, they finish the Mishkan, they come to Moshe, and they say to him, it's too heavy. They construct, it's like, it was the original IKEA. The Mishkan was the original IKEA. Assemble the parts. It was what it was, right? No wonder I hate IKEA. That goes back in my family. I don't know where to stick this thing. It's like crazy. So they finish the whole thing, and then it's because it's so big and so many parts and so heavy, no one could pick it up. So they go to Moshe, and they say to Moshe, "We can't pick it up." So Moshe says, "I can't pick it up either." So he goes.
What? How could he say that he can't pick it up? Wasn't he one of the people that assembled it?
He was, but that's at the end of this midrash. So he goes to God and he says, it's too heavy to pick up. So God says to him, listen, you just pretend that you're picking it up and I'll do it for you.
Love that.
Right. So why do we need to pretend?
That's a good question. Why do we need to pretend?
Right. Just, I'm fine. God, if you want to do it, go ahead. I can't do it. It's too much for me.
I guess we're all pretending, aren't we? We're pretending that we have control over our arms, but really it's Hashem that does it.
Oh, very good. That's what Avnok used to say all the time. How do you scratch your nose? No, I didn't ask you for a demonstration.
I know, but I couldn't.
It's very interesting. Every time I say that, people just go and scratch their nose. I know you can scratch your nose. You don't have to demonstrate.
No, I was doing it on purpose.
Yeah, but there's always somebody who does it. Like I don't know, you can't scratch your nose. Okay, fine. I'm the same way. So anyway, but how do you scratch your nose?
God lets you do it.
No, God lets you do it. God does it.
He gives you the energy to do it. He does it, actually.
He does it for you. I don't know. I don't know how to pick. I don't know how I'm picking my finger up and scratching my nose. I don't know how I'm doing that. There's no sequence. There's no button. There's no nothing, right? I just instead I want to scratch my nose. The Almighty picks up my finger and scratches my nose. So what's the difference between this and the Mishkan?
Nothing.
Nothing. In 19, I forget the exact year, 1973, I think it was, right? Laura Schultz, a 63-year-old grandmother, picks up the back end of a Buick. Now today, a Buick is a heavy car, right? But in those days, it was a really heavy car. They used steel, and they were not worried about pollution or anything like that. So they built really heavy cars, right? So how did she pick it up? She'd never picked up anything heavier than a bag of pet food, 50-pound bag of pet food. And these stories are very common. You can search the internet today. With the internet, you can see loads of them. How did she do it? The scientists have no clue.
Of course they don't.
Huh?
Of course they don't. They like to think that they do, but they have no clue.
Right, they go testosterone, not testosterone. What's the other one?
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline. Thank you. Sorry, adrenaline. Right, adrenaline is ridiculous. There's no amount of adrenaline will give you muscles you don't have. You don't have the physical ability to pick up the Buick. How did she pick it up? Her grandson was trapped underneath, and she davened to the Almighty. Please pick up. I need them. Did she think those words? No, she didn't think those words. But the same way we don't think the words. That's what the Talmud says. Everybody believes in God. Everybody believes in God. The people say they don't believe God. It's like your kid when they're 3 years old and say, "I don't love you anymore." Exactly. It's okay, fine. Do you want this candy or that candy? Well, I want that candy. It's like, Tony Kornheiser used to say to me, it's like, can you take me to the mall? I don't want to talk to you, but can you take me to the mall? And give me a credit card. So anyway, how do we get? We started off with the questions, right? With the complaints, right? So this week's Parsha. So how does it begin and end? So this week's Parsha begins and ends with a most powerful theme, which is transparency. The opening sentence of the Parsha starts with the Pekudei, the all the different parts of the Mishkan.
Why do they translate Pekudei as reckonings?
Yeah, it's a hard word to translate. That's one of the problems.
The beginning talks about transparency?
Yes, exactly.
Where does it talk about that? I see it talks
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, good question.
Ele Pekudei Mishkan Ha'edus, the tabernacle of testimony, Asher Pekad, which was calculated, Al Pi Moshe, which was accumulated or appointed or calculated, Avodas HaLeviim, the work of the Leviim, B'yad Itamar ben Aharon the Cohen, by the hand of Itamar, the son of Aaron the Cohen. See it?
Yeah.
So the Midrash Tanhuma comes along and says that anybody who is in charge of public funds, for instance, you collect money for poor people in your shul, has to have two people running it.
Yes.
You can't have a single person running it because you need two eyes. You need some, you understand? You need two eyes, right? You follow? There's one exception. What's that?
I'm guessing the Mishkan.
Exactly, the Mishkan. Moshe was beyond reproach. No one could possibly imagine that he could take anything of anything. Right? Nevertheless, he made sure there were two people watching. him and Itamar.
Ah.
That's transparency in this week's Parsha.
Ah, interesting.
Before we go into that in more depth, just to point out, the very last line of the Parsha is the same thing.
Ooh. Let's see.
Ianan Hashem is verse 38. Chapter 40, verse 38.
Mm-hmm.
Ianan Hashem al HaMishkan, on the Mishkan, Yomam by the day and a fire by night. Right? Le'anei, in front of the eyes, in front of in the view of all the Jewish people in all their journeys.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I don't know which cities or which installations we should bomb in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the news.
Yes.
They're all in a kerfuffle because they let it's known where they're going to be bombing in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
You follow?
Yes.
And the Pentagon doesn't want you to know, because what are you going to do?
It's not us they don't want to know. It's the enemies that they don't want to know.
Is that? And what are they going to do?
Well, if they know ahead of time, then they will not be where they should be, so they should die.
Okay, but this is Yemen we're talking about. We're not talking about the Soviet Union, or this is a very primitive, civil country. I don't know whether they have the capacity, but the point I'm trying to make is that the Almighty is deciding where the Jewish people should go. Do I have an opinion? Absolutely not. I don't know where to go. I don't know the route. I don't know anything of anything.
Uh-huh.
But when he's going to decide and he's letting everybody know, he didn't call in Moshe and Aaron in the lead to say, this is going to be our journey. This is the next trip. And let everybody else know. Wherever he could, he let everybody know wherever they could know.
Wow.
The maximum amount of transparency. In other words, going back now to the beginning of the Parsha, Moshe didn't need Itmar. It wasn't that anybody was suspicious. There's a lot of gold that's gone missing.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of any of that. It's because there's a power in transparency beyond the efficacy of it.
Right. It gives people a sense of my opinion is important, even though it's not.
Very good. More than just your opinion. You are important.
Because you care about my opinion.
Right. Because I care about you are part of this process.
Ah, that's even better.
You are not a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
You are not a subject. In other words, I don't inform, I use a fair amount of this AI stuff, right? And some of them is rather unnerving. They pretend that they're a real person, and they're very good at it. The AI is very good. So it'll say, what do you think? They'll talk like it's a real person, and you can get kind of, you can forget that it's just a machine. It's not really anyone there, and so you don't have to say please and thank you, but it implies that that's what you should be doing. But it's just a machine. You don't have to say please and thank you. Human beings are not machines.
Mm-hmm.
They're not subjects of yours. If you want, I said this before, it's an important idea. Like, slavery didn't end because all of a sudden humanity got humanity. Right? It ended because when you give people a choice of what they want to do, they're going to be a powerful force. Freedom is a very powerful force. The countries that have the most freedom are the most successful countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The reason why most of the countries of the world are democratic is because the ones that don't succeed.
Mm-hmm.
they are failed countries.
Right.
China, my wife made a very good point. What about China? Right?
China with the whole free trade. That's why they did as well as
Right?
they did.
So first of all, China is much more of a democracy. It's not a democracy, but much more of a open society than it was under the true communists. It's not a communist country like it used to be. It calls itself communist, but that's just a delusion. It's a dictatorship, right? But it's a much more open dictatorship than anything previous. But I hold that China's going to fall apart.
I'm with you.
I think it's true, but it's yet to be seen. But their success is because they're much more benevolent than anything previous. But they're a house of cards. They're I don't want to get into politics or anything, but people said the same thing about Russia until Reagan brought it down.
Mm-hmm.
But they thought, it turned out to be a paper tiger too, even though it was, it seemed to be very strong until it wasn't, and then everyone saw that it was all fake. It wasn't really, and you see that even more so with fighting Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
That it isn't the force that everyone thought that it pretended it was. So the greater democracy, the greater transparency, not just democracy. So countries are democratic because those are the systems that work. Now, it's really an absurd system. In other words, when you go and have an operation, or you're deciding to invest in something, or you're going to what career you should have, or where you should send the schools, you don't seek the opinion of everybody on your street or everyone in your neighborhood. Imagine if the important decisions of your life required a vote of all the people in your neighborhood, or even of your whole family, including your uncles and aunts. Yeah, exactly. Right? The biggest idiots would have an opinion and have a vote.
Right.
But that's exactly what we do. We have an election, and people who can barely read and write get to vote on who's going to be the Secretary of State, who's going to be the head of Health and Human Services, not in a direct way, but in an indirect way, that we're deciding who's going to pick these people. But how can these people who didn't even pass high school, maybe illiterate, have a vote? And how is that more effective than the smartest people in the world deciding what should be done?
I guess the reason it's effective is because God made it so.
So that's the whole concept that we're talking about here. Transparency is a force. That's why Moshe wanted to make sure that his decisions were transparent as best as possibly could be. That's the force. Families that engage in transparency are powerful families, and families that engage in authoritarianism are not. So when mom and dad make decisions and don't include wherever they could include their children, they just tell them that make the children feel that they are subjects, and therefore you don't get the commitment. This is very important in companies as well. You don't get the commitment. So you see, at one time when every country was a dictatorship, no one had an advantage. But when you have a democracy against a dictatorship, the democracy is always going to win.
Right.
Then China will not win. They think they're going to win. But they're not
Right, because they don't understand the spiritual concept.
They don't understand the power of transparency. Right? And most people don't understand the power of transparency. Right? And it tends to be that people who get power, as soon as they get the power, they go into closed doors. They don't realize they somehow forget what it was like when they didn't have the power. No one likes not having power. And therefore it creates resentment, and you don't get commitment. And without commitment, you don't have an organization. You don't have a family, you don't have an organization, you don't have a country.
But also, if they don't have a like a submission to God, for sure they don't have it.
Well, you see, that's a very important part of this whole concept. You see, you can't have transparency unless you have a trust in God. You can't have democracy unless you trust in God. It's interesting. It's on the penny, which they want to do away with. But you can't have transparency. You can't have democracy unless you believe in God, because, and that's why no one ever did it before. Because the idea, when it was first introduced, the idea that you're going to let everybody vote, even when democracy did start in America, although there was democracy in England before America, I just like to point that out. but even when you did, the democracy in England and in America was a very select few number of people, meaningfully so, because like you can't let people vote who don't own land, who don't have a stake in the outcome of the country. You know, the Supreme Court just rejected a law in New York that people who are not residents of New York can vote. People who are not residents of America, not citizens of America, can vote. Right? And the Supreme Court rejected it, threw it out. But I'm not saying I'm for the idea, but we understand that it's a crazy idea. Like people who aren't citizens of the country get to vote, right? You know, that's the same argument that people said people who are not gainfully employed or own land in America should not be allowed to vote.
How so? Because the whole idea is, if you're a citizen, you're saying that I am taking responsibility to do my civic duties. However, if you're not a citizen, then you really haven't made that pledge or that commitment to do so. So why should you be given the opportunity and the privilege to vote?
Because the power of voting, of transparency, of everyone having a voice, creates the power of the country. The people who are citizens are not necessarily qualified to make a decision about where America, you know, should we put a station on Mars, or any of the other, what interest rates should be, or any of the other complicated, important decisions that have to go on. I mean, you see that going on at the moment with Trump against the Democrats against the Republicans, without getting into it or not. But the point is that like there's some very heavy issues going on about tariffs and all these kind of things, right? And I'll be one of those who admits I have no idea whether tariffs is a good idea or not a good idea. But an awful lot of people are now, you know, they think they know. An awful lot of people really don't know. You know, if there was an election tomorrow, would vote against Trump because of tariffs. Who says you know anything about this? Why are we giving you the ability to make a decision? Now, on a rational point of view, that's true, except from the fact that from the point of view of the success of the world, of the success of a country, the more transparent you are, the more you engage people in the decision. And we saw this right from the very beginning of the Torah, when in Genesis, God says, "Na'aseh Adam, let us make man." The Midrash comes along. He says he engaged the forces of everything that was, all the angels, everything that was around that had an opinion. Now let me ask you something. If you take any decision you want in life, from the most serious from the most trivial, and you can ask, you have a you know, the old joke about the red phone on the desk, and you've got a phone on the desk that gets through to God. You know the old joke about you know, the president of America calls up the prime minister of Israel. He's got this whole thing we should do about Yemen, Iran. You follow? So the president says, "Why don't you have a red phone in your office?" He says, "What's a red phone?" He says, "That's a phone. It gets through to God." He says, "You have one?" He says, "Sure." He says, "Can I get one?" He says, "Yeah, but I gotta tell you the truth. It's very, very expensive. It's gonna add enormous amounts to your national debt. only use it for very important calls. So he has it in the Oval Office. He has a red phone. Whenever they say he calls up, it needs congressional approval because it's so expensive, blah, blah, blah. Right? One day, the President of America is visiting the Prime Minister of Israel, and he's sitting his there. He's got a red phone there. And he says, I'm not sure whether I should have coffee or tea. Picks up the phone. God, what should I have, coffee or tea? And he said, how can you afford to make every decision? These guys just picking up the phone. I don't know. Should I go out for lunch or not? Should I meet this president, prime minister? Should we pass this bill, not pass it? He's asking every single question he can.
Mhm.
How can you afford such a thing? He says, here is a local call.
It's so true. You feel God's presence there so clearly. And over here, it's sort of like the old distance calls. You remember how the old distance calls were very, very staticky, and you have to keep repeating yourself. Did you hear me? Did you hear me?
100%. When I first moved to Israel, I called my parents the first week I was there, the first few days I was there. And to make an international call, you couldn't make an international call from a phone. You had to go to the post office, and they had a room just for international calls. And you had to pay for it, and there was a whole to-do, So I had to organize my parents, would be on the phone, and stuff. It was like crazy stuff. But anyway, getting back. So if you have a decision to make, and you can ask God anything, would anyone's opinion matter after that? No, exactly. So here God's asking the world, the angels, whatever, right? What is this? You got any ideas on how we should make man? So what do you think the angels said? Well, I think you should have another ear. Make him a little taller, a little shorter, whatever. I don't know what the angels suggested.
Mhm.
Right? But what could they possibly suggest that would be better than what God suggested?
But that's exactly probably what they did suggest. They probably were in tune with God's will, so they agreed with whatever he said.
I love that answer. I don't agree with that answer, but I love that.
It sounds good, huh?
It sounds beautiful. You see, before the Torah is given, this same message is right there in Parsha's Yisro. Before we accept the Torah, what happens?
You mean the situation with the multiple levels of the organization?
Right. Who gave us that advice?
Yisro did.
Yisro. Terrible advice.
Why is it terrible?
Moshe points this out in Devarim. It was terrible advice. The Jewish people only wanted it because they thought they could avoid Moshe. It was when
you mean it added layers of management between him and them?
Right.
But he's still one person, though, to deal with millions of people.
So that's what the Midrash says. That this person who could split the Red Sea, he hasn't got time for you.
It's a good point. He's a man of God, so what's time to him?
Yeah, my son's father-in-law. So I was speaking to him. So he told me he was very close with Rav Yaakov Weinberg itself. I used to go to him with all his questions, and I had the same experience. I would go to him all kinds of questions, and whenever you called him, you could get him on the phone. And his is a man who's getting questions from literally from all over the world. But whenever I called him, I could get through. So he told me that one time he went to Rav Yaakov. He said, "I feel really bad asking you these questions because I know you're so busy, and these questions are not they're not going to write books about these questions."
Mm-hmm.
So Rav Yaakov answered him. He said, "My job is to find the time for you. Your job is to find my time."
I like that.
Like, it's not your job to worry about how I'm going to fit you in.
Right.
Right? That's my job. Right? I've got to figure out how to get. Your job is to bother me.
Right.
That's your job. Right? And so Yisro blew it. He suggested this idea. The Jews would go, yeah, let's do that. Because when you went into Yisro, it's like going into your mother. Right? Your mother says, "Oh, come on, I know you didn't mean that. Stop it. Say you're sorry. Give him a try." Yeah, but he doesn't deserve it. I know he doesn't deserve it. But your mother's not going to give you the justice of the whole thing, right? Moshe too. He knew who was right, who was wrong, and where it should go, and he cut to the chase.
So if that's the case, why did Hashem approve the plan?
Because the Jewish people wanted it.
Oh, you mean because of the collective will? God agreed with it?
Yeah.
Oh, shish kebab.
Exactly. But the point is that I'm bringing up, why is it in the top? Why is it there just before the giving of the Torah? For the same reason that I say Adam is there. Because even though it's worse advice, even though whatever the malachim, whatever the angels suggested is worse, even though somebody else would be better, a smarter person would be better running the country, or any other department, or your own business, or your own family, somebody else will be better as a mother and a father. Nevertheless, if you engage everybody, if you have them as much transparency as you possibly can, you will outbeat them all. The Torah, the Jewish people are a powerhouse because we listen to Yisro's advice. The mankind has its strength because God engaged the angels. That's the power of this idea. Transparency is a force.
So do you want to see how that relates to the word pakad according to this etymological dictionary?
Oh, yes. Hush, phenomenal.
It says pakad means invest with purpose or responsibility. That's the main one. And then it has a bunch of different ones. Commanding, mandating is number 1. Number 2, appointing, investing in office. Number 3, counting, valuing, like we've been saying. Number 4, remembering. Number 5, considering destiny. Number 6, missing. Number 7, depositing, giving in trust. Number 8, containing, listing. And number 9, designated place.
That's
very
it.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. Beautiful.
Because that's what we're talking about here, right?
Right.
It's all about responsibility and investing.
That's right. That's right. You can't expect anybody to be responsible who you don't respect. And respect means that I entrust you with what's going on.
Right.
And so many organizations fail in that they think that people are just automatons.
Just do what you're supposed to do. Do what I tell you.
Right. And they will do something, but certainly you will not get out of them everything that you could get out of them. Right. This was a phenomenal feature, phenomenal aspect, phenomenal midah of Rav Noach. I mean, he had an enormous organization, and it was definitely the best run Jewish organization, but probably the best run organization in the world. And I used to say that in meetings, and people would laugh at me. But I knew other organizations and how they run and how the infrastructure and how the sentiment amongst the people in the organizations. And not only that, but Rav Noach, in its day, they used to say this about the Second World War, that the people, in the army and the, you never had such high talent making these kind of decisions, because that was the whole point, is everybody understood in the Second World War, the American army, everybody understood what we were up against. It was a decision that everyone bought in. Everyone knew what the issues were. I don't think necessarily Roosevelt chose to make it up, because he was a very secretive person. He kept his cards very close to his chest. That's how he played the game. But the facts of the history itself unfolded without his choice. He was forced into decisions. But because everybody understood what we were up against, there was complete transparency. So everyone felt engaged. Everyone felt they were a stakeholder.
Interesting. Maybe that's what the whole point of the beginning and the ending is, because the beginning says, and these are the names of the children of Israel. And whenever Hashem starts talking about people's names, it's because he cares about them and he's thinking about them and investing value in them.
Oh, right. Very good. Right. Exactly.
And then the other part of this is that second paragraph talks about Paro saying, come, let's outsmart them, lest they become numerous. And he's trying to be not transparent in his, deceptive way of trying to enslave them.
Right.
So it's very interesting because there's a very immediate contrast in the beginning.
Right. That's a very good point, because Pharaoh is the classical dictator.
Right. No transparency.
No transparency. That is a very common theme in dictators. They don't have transparency, and it's not the theme of Trump. You might not like him, but he's incredibly, as a president's goal, he's incredibly transparent.
Mm-hmm.
They have reporters following him. He gives them access and time and questioning in abundance, more than we've seen. I don't think we've ever seen a president like this. Right?
You'd think he'd want to spend that time making important decisions, but the fact that he makes himself available tells you a lot.
It tells you an awful lot. This is a remarkable thing, because he's not afraid of the decisions he's making. Right? He's not hiding an agenda, which is the mark of a corrupt leader.
It's funny though, because like the ones that don't like him like to call him the opposite of what he is. They like to call him a dictator that's corrupt. Right. But it's exact opposite. So it's telling you something about them more than that it is about him. Right.
100%. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Very interesting. Anyway, let's finish off with just Pesach's coming. So I wanted to share something with you about Pesach. So the very last thing that we do in the Haggadah is eat the afikomen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the Haggadah points out that you're supposed to not eat any. Why not? Because you're supposed to keep the taste of the afikomen until the next day. It should stay in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Follow?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what you had for lunch, right? But can you still taste what you had for lunch?
I don't even remember what I had for lunch. Maybe I didn't have lunch. I don't remember.
So how can it possibly be the taste of afikomen until the next day?
You know what the taste is that I recall? Maybe I'm misremembering here, but it's always like, I've already eaten, I'm full. Now we have to eat this. That's what I usually remember.
Right. And the Haggadah warns you. The rabbis warn you.
Seem very Pesach-like.
Right. The rabbis warn you. Be careful. You got the afikomen. Right. But nevertheless, it doesn't take away from the question. How can you possibly remember what the afikomen tastes? You can't remember what things taste like. We don't have that ability to recall. So you said, what is it telling you? Because the afikomen really is not the afikomen. What we eat is not the afikomen. What's the real afikomen?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's not unusual.
That's true.
Why are you letting that stop you?
It's usually a process of trying to figure out what you're talking about.
What is the real afikomen? Was the Korban Pesach?
Oh, I feel like you told us this before. It has like feelings of return.
That's very thematic, right? It's the Korban Pesach. What was it like to eat the Korban Pesach?
Oh, delicious lamb, juicy.
You know what it was like? It's such a taste, you had to remember it till the next thing you ate. How is that possible? So you see, we tend to think with all of this, Pekudei and all the Parshas leading up to this, that the Mishkan was just this building. You can see pictures of it, you can imagine it, but we have no idea what it was like.
Sorry to interrupt, Rabbi. I thought about this question that you had last week. And it occurred to me, again, another idea Hashem popped into my head. It occurred to me exactly what it is you said before. We talked last week about a transformation from bitter to sweet. What maybe the Mishkan represented for everybody was the transformation of slaves into artisans of the highest caliber because they made space for God.
Oh,
So in the
good.
same way, in order for you to turn bitterness into sweet, you have to recognize that God is in it and that you have to find how does this bitterness become sweet. So too, the Mishkan, when you looked at it, you were amazed at how something so beautiful and, large by their standards could exist and made by a bunch of slaves that just recently left Egypt.
Right.
And what is it? It was a transformation of people giving their heart to Hashem and Hashem imbuing them with the wisdom and the skills necessary to create something so beautiful. Maybe I'm taking drugs.
I knew it. Very good. I love it. Very, very good. So back to the Afikoman. So what was it like to eat the Afikoman? The taste will stay in your mouth. So we think of the Mishkan as this building, right? It's not this building. What would stay in your mouth, right? You ever get angry at one of your kids and lose it?
Yes.
Right? How long does the memory last?
It lasts only up until I talk to them and I tell them that I'm sorry and that's not the way I wanted to treat them and that I didn't like what they did and I'd like better.
Fine, but nevertheless, the memory of when you lost it will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Only the big ones, Rabbi. The little ones, not so much.
That's fine.
Only the big ones.
But why do they stay with us?
Because you feel horrible.
That's true. But they stay with us because they touched a part of our soul.
Come again?
You see, if you take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and put down all the bad things that ever happened to your entire life. But on one side is all the spiritual, emotional things. On the other side is all the physical things. You broke a leg, it's because the physical. You were uninvited to a birthday party, it's the spiritual, the emotional. Right? Something becomes very clear if you do it. And I highly recommend you do it. Is the spiritual and emotional is a much bigger list.
Of course, it stays with you.
Not only is it a bigger list, but you remember what it tasted like. You might
mean like the bitterness associated with it.
Well, you could say that, right? You might remember you broke your leg in the 5th grade, but you do not remember what it felt like. You cannot recall that pain.
That's true. That is fleeting.
Right. So you see, why is that? Because it's like somebody else's bed, right? You don't sleep in it. So you don't know, understand? Your bed is the thing you carry with you. Your soul is what you carry with you. Your body isn't.
Right.
So you remember everything that happened to your soul. It stays with you. You don't lose that.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. It makes sense.
So the Afikoman was that. See, we think of the Afikoman as lamb.
Juicy lamb.
Juicy lamb. Right? Which it was. I don't know how juicy it was. It was roasted. I don't know. But the point is it was lamb, right? No, it wasn't. It was an experience you'd never forget.
A spiritual experience, you're saying.
We don't have, imagine for a minute, when the first people went to the moon, the thing that they remarked, the first things out of their mouths when they got close to the moon, I think it's Apollo 9, they said it's incredibly black and white. It's just black and white. Imagine for a minute they put, God forbid, a mission on the moon, like permanent housing on the moon, and they have a child raised there, and all the food is bland, and all they see is black and white all day long, no color. What would happen to that person?
You mean, what do you mean what would happen? They don't know anything different.
No, you're right, they don't know anything different, but a big chunk of their personality, of their psyche, of their soul, of their neshama is going to be frustrated. They want color and they want taste, but they don't have it. Because all they have is prepackaged meals that just for nutrients, but they have no flavor to it. You follow? Their soul needs it. You follow? Our soul needs an afikoman, and we don't have it.
You mean we now have half of a matzah where really we want the paschal lamb?
We want a paschal lamb that when you eat it, you'd remember what it tasted like. It had such a meaningful impact on you that you would remember it till you ate something else. We don't have food like that.
That's because we don't have the Beit HaMikdash.
That's true. But when a soul wants it, like a soul wants color.
Yes, I'm agreement. I want the Beit HaMikdash. I'm done with this darkness, man.
So that's what the Haggadah ends with. That's what we should be aiming for. Where our lives are so bland, we don't even realize, we've forgotten what it is. We've been raised on the moon in black and white. You understand?
Can I disagree on one point? It's not a question of blandness. It's a question of depth. We are missing the depth of our lives and the depth of relationships and the depth of that relationship with God. And we have surface. That's what we have right now. And we're supposed to be satisfied with surface. I don't think so. I can't take it anymore.
That's it. That's what Pesach is getting us on. That's why Pesach leads to Shavuos.
Which is marriage.
Which is the marriage, exactly. But
wait. What do you mean? How does Pesach lead to the marriage? What does Pesach represent?
Pesach is the freedom. You can't be free until you
choose the marriage.
But you can't be free until you realize the frustration. This isn't any good. It's not good for man to be alone. You've got to recognize it yourself. That's why we have the questions.
Wait. What is the frustration that you feel at Pesach? I'm not following this part.
The afikoman. We don't have anything that's got taste to it. It's all surface. There's no depth.
So annoying.
That's right. That's why we need. Once you get there, now you're ready to start Shavuos. That's why we start counting after Pesach towards Shavuos. But you first got to recognize it with Pesach.
Oh, this is going to be some Pesach. Now that I understand that my perspective on how there's no depth is related to Pesach and how we're looking for depth, and that's what Pesach means.
There you go. Bingo.
1 second, Rabbi. Now you're making me wonder what the word Pesach has. What word? What translation that has? Can we have 1 more minute? I'm sorry.
Sure, take your time.
Let's see. Samach comes after Lamed Mem Samach. Pesach. It's not in here. I'm shocked. Oh no, it is here. No, that's not it. Pesach is not in here. Oh, it is here. Here, Pesach. Skip, walk unevenly. Walk unevenly? Unevenly? That's a strange translation, no? Number 1, stepping haltingly. Number 2, passing over, skipping. Number 3, being lame. Number 4, offering for the holiday. There's something about this stepping haltingly. As if like you're on thin ice or something, and at any moment, if you step in the wrong place, you're going to fall through?
I don't know. You got me.
That's a strange stepping haltingly. Pesach hu leHashem. Exodus 12:11.
That's referring to the Korban Pesach.
That's referring to the Korban Pesach?
Yeah. But it's the name of it, the word, what it means. That's what you're referring to. I mean, the classical, the Pesach means to pass over.
Right, but this seems to suggest there's more than just one translation and that both apply.
Well, I think they do. I mean, it's not to go in a straight line, to not go in a ordered fashion. It's to cross over, to skip something, to miss a beat. That's how I think they all relate. The etymology of it.
Skip a beat, stepping haltingly. How did they go get the lamb? Did they do it with like fervor, or did they do it with caution?
How do they what?
How did they go about getting the lamb for the Pesach offering?
In Egypt?
Yes. Did they do it with fervor, or did they do it with caution?
Well, it's a very interesting thing that you're saying this, because that was their idol, the Egyptians' idol. You
Right.
can imagine the Egyptians go, what, you know, like I'll tell you a very interesting story. I have a student who's married to a literal pagan, and his mother came to visit, and the next door neighbor was having a hamburger, and she's from India, and she was, in her mind, this was, you're sacrificing my God on your barbecue. Like, she was going crazy. How can you do such a thing? That, you know, so the neighbor came over and invited them over. Right, this woman would not eat off the plates that person ate off of. Talk about separation of meat and milk, right? It's like someone's eating meat yesterday, now comes and eats, and you won't let them eat meat. You won't let them eat milk on your plates because they ate meat yesterday, right? That's a level, right? So we don't have pagans like that in the world, in America today. So these, you know, imagine the whole of Egypt was like that. You're taking their land, right? Their God. And what do you, right? Everyone's asking, what everyone's got these lambs. What are you doing with the lambs? We're going to sacrifice them tomorrow.
Step haltingly.
That's right. It must have been an interesting, tremendously brave thing for the Jews to do.
Maybe that's true of relationships too. That before it gets into any depth, you're a little bit uneven. You're a little bit cautious. You're a little bit like,
That's a very interesting point. Right. That's a good point. There's a certain creakiness. There's a certain unsteadiness that has to be straightened. It has to be addressed. Interesting. Very good. Lots of food for thought tonight. Excuse the pun.
Yes. And also, did you notice how there's 2 pekads in the beginning of this chapter?
Yes.
I mean, beginning of this 2 pekads. It's very interesting.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to the last pekad.
Okay. Thank you.
Toda rabah. Thank you so much. Have a great Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.